Let it do the spinny spins. Okay, and we're live.
Welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late. It is technology is an amazing thing. Is there an IT guy in the house?
I was gonna say, yeah, technology is amazing until it isn't. I think we all know that.
This is episode 391 of the one and only IT in the D show, broadcasting live from our quarantine homes. This is Bob the Sales Guy. That is Dave the Geek. Randy, you do the Twitters, is doing the Twitters, and you can find us online at itinthed.com. And do us a favor, give us a like on the socials and subscribe to us everywhere fine podcasts are sold.
And yeah, a cheers of some sort is in order. This is the anniversary of the last time we were all in studio together.
We were talking about, like, it seems like 80s movie quarantine night seems like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a year ago where I introduced the kids to Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and all that good stuff. And Weird Science and
all the the heavy duty hardcore Zoom drinking nights that I was doing with everybody, like 4 and 5 nights a week. Yeah, I mean it is both hard to believe it's been a year and then hard to believe it's only been a year when you think back on it.
But hey, to celebrate our 1 year anniversary, we have brought back the man, the myth, the legend. I'm trying to do a proper wrestling introduction, but no, Fred Brown's in the house.
Hailing from parts unknown.
From Ann Arbor, Michigan.
How you guys all doing?
Good. We're really thankful to have you back on again to kind of give us. We're hoping that this is the final round of updates on this thing.
It might be. It might be the last time we have to have this meeting, and we'll have to come in person. I'll try out some of your drinks there, David.
What the hell are you gonna?
Hey, I'm all in favor.
No, it's like Murder, She Wrote. Like, Fred's gonna have nothing to do until the next pandemic hits. So he's hoping someone dies. Pardon the.
Come on, conspiracy theories.
No show. Nobody gets murdered. No show.
I've been working overtime. We had 534,500 deaths or something.
Oh my God!
30 million people infected in the United States. That's a lot of people in a year. Man.
Well, there was everyone was kind of trying to screaming about, like, oh, the deaths are going to be the same, and it turned out that wasn't the case. Deaths were up, I think, 16-18% year over year. So yeah, it wasn't a thing. So yeah,
that's the funny thing is, looking back at my memories that pop and that kind of stuff. And, like the one that popped for me yesterday, where like yesterday was the last time a year ago I was bouncing around downtown, and I was like, wow, like every like places that usually have hundreds of people in them have like 6. If you ever wanted to hit like one of these restaurants you've heard about and you're not, and I even said it, and you're not in a high risk group and you can be safe and you can be careful, you will have the best service in your life. And for the love of God, tip like you have a crush on the person waiting on you. And then today, all the memories are popping about all the executive orders starting to drop, and Whitmer's like first press conference that she really had about how crazy this was all going to get. Yeah, and here we are.
Yeah, I was hoping that we were hoping that it wouldn't be quite so bad, and I said, well, there's a chance that it won't be quite so bad, but I thought there was a pretty bad chance, about 80% chance they gave it that it would get pretty bad, and sure enough, it was better in the summer, and then it just crept back up on us, unfortunately. So.
Yes, I mean, and I guess that's the big question, I guess, is so now that we've got the vaccines rolling out, we've got and it is, I mean, I get, dude, people are pent up and nuts, and that was kind of my comparison when I shared the memory yesterday. Is a year ago I was going to places that had either nobody or like at most 6 people in them. Man, Saturday afternoon, I watched 3 or 4 party buses just chock full of people, drunk, show up places, about 10 of those pedal pub things that were whipping around, and people were throwing their arms around each other and hugging and yelling at each other from a foot away. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna sit in my little quarantine studio room, thanks. And like, I need like a Lysol bazooka when I walk out of here.
No, but to add to that, it's funny. I see the same thing. There's certain bars that I used to frequent. We've been kind of making our rounds that are 2, 3, 4 people in it, and the other ones you can't get a seat. So it's kind of funny how even though we're supposed to be at 50%, there's a lot of places that are just saying, open it up, let's do this, which is, I guess good for the business owners and the workers, bad for, if something happens.
Yeah, and it may be short-sighted. It may be that it's good for a couple of nights, and then you lose all your all your clientele for the next few months because they're badly ill, and that would be a shame if that happens. But it does, sadly, because the way this thing spreads, it spreads in pockets. So sometimes you can go to the bar 3-4 times, nothing's happened. You go the next time, and 60 people get infected. It's and we're not sure.
Well, so and Bill, one of our buddy Big Bill, just chimed in with a comment. He could just based on something you mentioned. He said, "Okay, well, so then why did it die in the summer?"
Yeah, well, there were a couple things. First, we started getting better. So there are a couple things about Michigan's patterns. Michigan's patterns, we had a big jump, early on because of the car industry. We got lots of international travel, lots of people in China, lots of people in Germany, all brought back to Detroit. And then our death rates were really, really high. We didn't know how to really treat this thing because we were one of the first groups to really have this come on to us. But, New York had some, California had some. Turned out that we had both variants here. New York had the B1, basically the G variant, the European variant. California had the D, the old-fashioned D variant. California got over it real fast. New York and us took a lot longer on that first wave that went through, and unfortunately, we had a lot more deaths. And then the second time, we actually had a much higher peak in November, December, but a much lower death rate. And if you look at the death rate went like this, and then it was flat. Meanwhile, we went like this. Through 2 series of new cases, and that second round, we really understood a lot more about how to treat this thing and did a lot better keep people out.
Not to dispel some myths and stories and what people are talking about, was the first round due to the nursing home mandate? Because if you look at New York, California, Michigan, there was I think 5 states that were pushing people back in that tested positive. Yeah. How much did that affect the overall death rate?
Bad. We think it may have quintupled it. Unfortunately, because we didn't know, we just didn't know. We thought that people were protected. They didn't realize that a lot of aerosolization was occurring and people were spreading it through the air. No one was wearing masks. And so, and of course, our most vulnerable groups were exposed worse. And so that's what people are starting to come up with, is that the nursing home piece really was a killer. But and so that on the second round, we'd learned, and I think we'd gotten about twice as good at treating people as well. So the combination of the nursing home regulations plus the better treatments we got with dexamethasone, proning people, and so on really helps out as far as death rate goes. I got a few. So last night, Harvard asked me to do the same thing. They said, "Why don't you come back and talk to us about what's going on?" So if you want, I can show you some of those slides, or we can just talk whatever you prefer. It took us like an hour to go through the slides, but you guys are smart, so they would go fast.
Okay, well, yeah, so I know I know what's on the tip of my brain more than anything else is.
What are you worried about?
Well, so now we've got all these variants, and so there are quite a few people that I know that have gone through and gotten either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, and so great. And you're feeling cocky and comfortable and life's good. But then we've talked about this before where, okay, all of these variants are because the mutations are happening on that protein that those 2 vaccines are targeting. Should everybody have waited for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
That's a great question.
Is there going to be a third shot necessary for the Moderna and Pfizer folks? How is this kind of shaking out?
Yeah, so we actually did the analysis, and it turns out if you can get a shot now versus waiting for a slightly better one, get the shot now. I'll show you some of that analysis. So okay, and because that's a really important point. Let me, or how do I get into the share mode?
There's a share.
You guys are on different technology now.
I know.
So let me see if I can
pull user comments in, trying something cute.
Wow, I've got an option for 2 monitors, and oh, here we go. Share my screen. There we are. Now I got confused with all the different options here. I think. Let me see if I can't read the total file name, and I've got a few things open, so I'm hoping this is the right
Oh, we're gonna wind up on Fred's secret browser history.
Oh, we're in luck. Yeah. No, we're in luck. We're in luck. We're good. So, from the beginning. So this is the big question, right? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
This is the big question. No, are we all going to go down to Daytona Beach and have a great time?
No.
I am tomorrow.
Oh, so you're right. We can't really do that. This is the big race, and it's basically us against the humans. And let me see if I can go ahead and find us against the viruses. Let me see if I can find that analysis about whether to wait or not. Oh boy, so it takes a little bit of time to get there.
Well,
So here's our data.
I don't think anybody would say waiting is because I mean, to your point, hey, if you can get whatever, better to be most of the way there than none of the way there.
Yeah. Well, it turns out that some people have actually. Well, don't forget, Mayor Duggan originally said we want to wait for the Pfizer vaccine. We don't want to have that J&J vaccine. Right. And there's some countries that, and then to his credit, he said, I restudied it. I'm a healthcare guy. I know that, and it's better to just get the vaccine. And so here's the trial data, and you can see that these are Kaplan-Meier curves, and basically the curve shows how much cumulative disease you get when the blue line on the left hand side is Pfizer, and they were measuring mild to severe disease, and you can see that was going up nicely, and basically lots of people were getting sick who were in the placebo group, and not very many people after day 12 were having that problem at all with the active vaccine. So you can get a sense of just how much that separates is occurring. And the problem is people looked at AstraZeneca data and Johnson & Johnson data, and they said, gosh, J&J is only 66%, 72% in the United States versus 95%, for Pfizer and Moderna. So maybe I should try to get the Pfizer vaccine. And the answer is no, you can't compare the data sets. And the reason is, number one, if you notice, I've got the data set for J&J on the right hand side. This is what they submitted to the FDA, and you can see that basically their line looks a lot different. And the problem we got with the vaccines, both vaccines, is you're not really protected, and we know you're not really protected for the first 12 days. Right. So if you're vaccinating a lot, if you're vaccinating and you're sitting there in the middle of a pandemic outbreak like they were with J&J, and you got hundreds of people getting sick in the first 12 days, both in your group and in the placebo group, it doesn't really show anything, right? Because you're expecting that, and so unfortunately, you got to add all that in.
Is that a factor of people getting cocky and saying, okay, well, I got my second shot. Woohoo!
No, this is all about first shot. This is after the first shot. Okay. You don't get any protection at all. And then this is during clinical trials. So this was back for Pfizer. It was back already in June, and on J&J was more in the December time range. And between those times, we just took off with how much COVID was in the area, right? Because it's a seasonal disease, and so you can see just how much steeper that J&J curve is, right? You're just getting so much more infections, and the problem is you have to add in all the stuff in the beginning of the trial, and you look at that and go, oh boy, we got an awful lot of infections. The truth is, though, we knew that you weren't protected until day 12, 14 or so, and so that first 14 days, whether you're on Pfizer or Moderna or J&J, you're not protected. So if you're getting your that vaccine and you don't wait 14 days, you got nothing. So understand that as the first thing. Don't take your vaccine the first shot and say, okay, I'm ready to go. You don't have any protection for 14 days. And so the problem was that you got that J&J was doing their testing while while people were incredibly infected, whereas Pfizer and Moderna was both pretty calm. Not that many infection points. And then you had the problem that J&J was in the middle, was also affected by the variants, and that shows by if you throw in the South African results, you get 66%, and there's only 57% effective in South Africa. In the United States, for 72% effective. So you already have some offset. And then the endpoints, the clinical endpoints, were very different. right? Because Pfizer said, if you have a sniffle, come and talk to us about it, and we'll test you and see if you got something. For J&J, they said, if you have a sniffle and you're starting to run down on your oxygen levels and you can't breathe well and you got serious coughs and the temperature above 103, then you come and talk to us. So that a whole different level of of hurdle was required in both those pieces. And then of course the regulators also. Questions are very different. For J&J Moderna, it was a brand new mRNA vaccine. So they had all sorts of safety questions about, what will happen to the lipids and where it was going. And J&J, it was much more about, we've got this adenovirus. It's a separate it's a different technology. So they asked different questions of the pharmaceutical manufacturers. And so they conducted the test fundamentally differently. Even though they look quite similar, the questions answered were quite different. And so if you combine these two things, you can get a sense of just how much higher the infection rates were for both. But again, the separations were excellent. And the major point was, of course, that no one died. So if you look at all of the clinical trials that we've had, we've conducted tests in tens of thousands now. I think so. We have about 45,000 people tested between J&J with the active vaccine. They had 2 deaths. In 45,000 people. So that's what you really want to look at. Am I going to die? And the answer is no. If you get the vaccine, you're not going to die.
Criteria, yeah.
And so this is what happened in Germany, right? Germany said, we think that the AstraZeneca vaccine isn't so good for us. We want to wait until we get our own BioNTech, right? That's the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine that they were proud Germans. So we want to wait. We're going to wait until we get the right vaccine for us. Well, they waited for 50 days while they had a death rate of 200 people a day, waiting for something that was 4% better. And probably if they'd taken either vaccine, they probably would have had 0 deaths in that period from the people who were infected. So that actually killed off about 10,000 extra people. And then, of course, it caused everyone else to think about, gosh, is that vaccine really safe at all? Maybe I shouldn't take anything, and maybe things will be all right. So, man, oh man, I've done this for literally kind of 50 different people. And they come and say, Fred, should I can get a guaranteed J&J vaccine tomorrow, or I have to wait 35 days or 10 days or 15 days for Pfizer. And no matter what that person, if the person is really healthy, young, no risk factors, really low chance of death anyway, it's still better to take the vaccine today than wait for tomorrow for a Pfizer, or wait for tomorrow for Moderna, or wait for tomorrow for a different vaccine.
So basically, like whatever you can get, just shut up and take it is what.
Yeah, because look at what you're going to sweat a 4% difference in severe case rate, and your chance of dying is 1 in 600. What if you take the vaccine, it's 1 in 10,000. Right. You bet time to move over to the 1 in 10,000 side of the.
Hey, Fred.
Equation. Yeah.
Is there anything out there that is saying one's better than the other, or we're Team Pfizer? What did you get, Madera? You can't come in if you got the Johnson & Johnson. You're only Pfizer. I'm trying not to be funny, but it's
are there going to be gang signs getting thrown? I got Pfizer.
I can smell it happening. It's just like what are you? And then it's like we're better. No, we're healthier. Like, is it? Are they all pretty much the same at the end of the day, or is this thing going to divide people again?
No, right now it should not divide people. In fact, I actually have talked to both the president personally. This is a personal discussion. President of Moderna, president of Pfizer, and I had the head of vaccines, Paul Stiffels for J&J, and I said, and they actually, I didn't even have to ask the question. They volunteered and said, look, I'm telling you the same thing. And this is a larger audience. It wasn't just for me personally. And this is, big audiences. We're talking tens of thousands of people, national society meetings and so on. And they said, they each said it freely. They said, I'm going to tell you the same thing I'm telling my family. If you have a chance to take a vaccine, even though I'm the president of Pfizer, take that vaccine now. Don't screw around and wait for my vaccine even if it's slightly better, because the truth is that right now the opportunity of a vaccine is so much better for you to live, not have severe disease, not have complications by taking any vaccine than waiting even a couple days for a quote unquote better vaccine is overwhelming. And so even the presidents and CEOs and chairmen, and these guys are super competitive people, right? I know two of them really well personally. I mean, you play racquetball with these guys, and they want to take your head off. You know,
are they collaborating at all?
Chance to say ours is better, they're going to say it.
Right. But are they collaborating at all? Are they treating this like competition?
Oh no, they're super competitive. Now the scientists are talking to each other, which is great. And it turns out that J&J was supposed to have quite a bit more vaccine than they actually ended up having. We were expecting them to have come on stream with like 20, kind of 40 million doses, and they came on stream with 4 million doses. And we said, oh man. And so Biden, to his credit, got on the phone and called up Merck and said, Merck, you got capacity. Can you help out J&J? And let me tell you, J&J and Merck, they hate each other. I shouldn't say it, but they're not really good friends. And Merck said, yes, sir, yes, sir. And they're gonna pump 2 billion doses through a Merck factory to get it to make it happen faster. Yeah. So I mean, people are coming together because they realize, if we screw around with this and say, we're slightly better, or we're better for this or that, people are going to die. So they're on board. That's the reason we go into healthcare, is because we want to save people's lives. So if you start to play those games, now eventually I think there is going to be some separation for a couple of different reasons. I think over the course of the few years, the governments, there's a big price difference, right? So J&J vaccine's $10, Pfizer Moderna vaccine's $30 for full course. So $30-$40. So if you're talking about 7 billion doses, that starts to that $20.
I mean, yeah. Are you drinking top shelf, or are you drinking rail all night? Yeah.
So they're going to want to know. They're going to really want to know. Okay, I know, no kidding. Which ones, is there a slight difference or not for that? But for those bucks. And the other big thing. There are two other big things. So cost is one big reason we're going to have some separation. The other reason for separation is that some of these are going to be shown to be better for certain variants. And so if you're talking about an old, for example, last year's Pfizer vaccine versus this year's Moderna booster, and that's just a random scenario. It could be all sorts of different scenarios. And you've been boosted recently with the greatest thing. That may be important for some countries if you want to visit them, or some cities if you want to visit. They're having a big outbreak of a variant, and it turns out the one you've got, the shot that you've got, is old and therefore isn't as protective. They may want to have you get a boost to the new one, and so that'll be a factor. And finally, there's going to be some separation, I think, between certain populations. And so certain people who have predispositions to be watching this and talking to their doctors to see, whether there's one vaccine that didn't show as good efficacy for over 60-year-olds with diabetes right now. Now, statistically, it didn't matter, but you want to take a look at that and see if that suggestion statistically starts to come true in real life. Same thing is true for over 70-year-olds. So the diabetes question came up with with J&J, and the over 70-year-olds came up with Moderna. Again, within the confidence intervals, but you saw a little bit of maybe differences in those results. I don't want to say right now, though.
Have they found or linked a commonality yet as to who's getting sick after the second dose and who's not? I hear these horror stories. No, I hear these horror stories of people getting deathly sick. Both my parents had their second dose, nothing, zero. Yep. So they're in their late 70s, so they were prime candidate for. So I'm just saying, do they find a commonality?
Oh yeah. There's one really big one. You know what it is?
You have it.
No.
Oh.
The younger you are, the worse you're going to feel.
Really?
Yeah. The reason for that is that us old guys, our immune system is sort of old and tired, so we don't really have much of a response when you get the antigen pumped into you. But if you're 18, young, healthy, on the wrestling team, and you get an antigen, your body's going to say, "Holy cow, let's fight this thing!" And that's how you make the antibodies and the response. And so, if you're younger, you are going to feel it like, I shouldn't say that. But
so what you're saying is all of the years of abuse that we poured onto our systems are actually going to benefit us for once?
Yeah. Well, so and the other big thing is that whether it's the first or second dose. So first dose is like 60% of the effective of the overall reaction level they have on the second dose. So if you have if you have a first dose and having a big response, get ready for an even bigger one on the second dose. And there's some things I should tell you about the vaccination, right? There's some better ways and worse ways to get vaccinated. And I should just tell you about that real quick because maybe it'll make a difference.
Bob's looking for a suppository.
Hey, we're coming out with nasal mist. We're going to come out with orals. There'll be different routes of administration.
No, they're letting veterinarians administer the shot. So I'm waiting to find a licensed veterinarian.
There you go. One of those big horse needles.
They'll distract you with some cheese or some peanut butter while they're sticking.
So if you're going to go get a vaccine and you want to have optimal response, now even if you don't do these things, you'll still have a response. But if you want to have optimal response, the best thing to do is don't take an anti-inflammatory 2 days before, all the way to 7 days after you've had your vaccine, and that's because it reduces the most important part of your response, which is in the lymphocytic system and the cellular immunity space. So these common pain relievers, you don't feel so good, you have a little temperature, so I'm going to take some ibuprofen, I'm going to take some acetaminophen. Don't do it. Go to bed, get an ice pack on the thing, call it a day. And also, you want to actually spoof up your immune system before you get vaccinated. So the day before, get a nice night's sleep, get plenty of exercise before if you can. Not vigorous is probably overstating the fact. You just need to, I'd go for a nice walk in the sunshine for like 20, 30 minutes the day before. Don't get all stressed out.
Right. Yeah, that's the one that's going to be a problem.
And then if you want to, you can take a couple of immune boosters like some zinc or some vitamin D3 or so on. But if you get some nice sun and get some fresh air out there with heart beating a little bit, your immune system's going to be ready to get after the vaccine and do a good job on the immune response.
I mean, if your doctor is having you take an anti-inflammatory, don't stop.
No, don't counter. I'm talking about over the good.
Oh yeah. But even then, if your doctor.
Although if you're taking a major anti-inflammatory, if you're on steroids, for example, you really want to come off them because the steroids will just completely wipe out any immune response you got. And same thing with your immunocompromised. You really have to talk to your doctor carefully before you take.
Tammy just chimed in to echo my avoid stress and depression. Yeah, good luck with that one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we are stressed out. One of my friends is is working on in the mental health area, and man, we're off the charts. We're like 30% of us are depressed, or have 31% are depressed. 26% have high anxiety. Illicit drugs are up 15-20%. It's so we are really on the edge.
I believe it. An old friend of mine is a psychologist, and does a lot of like telehealth and that kind of stuff. She said she's been busier over the course of the last 6 months in particular than she has ever been in her life. Just went through and got her national certifications so that she could and she's in Florida. So she's been like in the thick of this the entire time. And so, and she's just like, she's like, if I can do telehealth from anywhere, no, I'm going to get out of Florida. I'm going to go find someplace I can pull up in for a while.
Probably not Texas. So one of the things we had to run at the national level was you remember the big fight that the governor of Texas came out and Governor Abbott, everyone loved the guy, good old boy. He says, we're going to open this place up, and then Joe Biden comes out and says that's a Neanderthal thing to do. Well, it turns out,
Neanderthal way of thinking. I think
it turns out that people who have high levels of Neanderthal gene are 22% more protected than people who don't. So hey, maybe Biden was onto something. So we got my genetic studies.
Just for the record, I got my 23andMe, zero Neanderthal.
Zero Neanderthal. Oh,
there's a lot of people that would argue with that.
I was like, I think you got it. You got someone else's results, Bob.
They switched the results at birth.
There's no way.
So I should probably show you some of those results we did for Texas. That are sort of funny. So with Texas, so there are a couple of things. The good thing is that we're starting to get more accepted of taking the vaccine. We think we're going to be about 75% of people are willing to take the vaccine.
I have been
by the end of the year.
I have been super surprised by the turn that I have seen in our show hosts and their guests over the course of the past 2 months. 2 months ago, I'm going to say probably of the folks that run our studios were just like, nope, not taking it. Don't believe in it. It's going to, whatever. It's going to make an antenna grow out of my head, whatever. Over the last couple weeks, I'm hearing a lot of, you know what, I've thought about it, I've watched it, and a lot of the credit goes to you because I walk into the studio armed with everything you give me. And I'm like, well, here's how this really works. And if you want, go watch this. And this will give you the rundown on it. And like, yeah, I've listened to what you've had to say and I've done my own research and and you know what? Yeah, I'm on the list now to go get it because I want to protect the people around me.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, that's the whole thing. We have so many excess deaths. It's hard to disagree that something's going on. COVID is the logical explanation for all this excess death, and we got something that's 95% protected. Man, that's huge.
Well, and honestly, that's actually a good question for you before you dive into Texas.
Sure.
So, because I know that's the one question that I've been hit with that I don't know the answer to, but I said I would ask the next time we had you on.
Sure.
Is once you've been vaccinated, like, how safe does that make you? Like, can you still be a carrier? Can you still be a spreader? Because like for example, like I know I'm a carrier for strep. So like when strep season comes around, I won't have any of the symptoms or anything, but like my lymph nodes might swell up a little bit for one day, and I'm like, I better tell the kids not to be jerks and use my toothbrush or anything. So like, is that what's the likelihood possibility of that being a thing? Because that's the thing. I mean, as people get vaccinated, you're going to see more and more people out. So that's
right, and rightfully so. So here are some of the numbers. Right now, we're making some assumptions, but here are a couple scenarios for you, Dave. Here's person one. They're unvaccinated. Right on the top side, you see an unvaccinated person dealing with someone who has been vaccinated. The chance that person, if they were dealing in the general public with unvaccinated people or transmitting at regular rates, you can get a sense of what the attack rates are to our understanding. If you're out there and you've got a symptomatic case and you're talking to someone with a symptomatic case and you've got no PPP, 20% chance, around 18% chance, you're going to get it. That's a high rate, right?
Yeah.
If your family comes through and you're in a family of two, 42%. These are all the stay-at-home mom, single family homes,
right?
Single parent homes, really high attack rates. Spouses, if your spouses, got it, chances are, only almost 50-50, you're going to get it as well. So you get a sense of there's where you are without a vaccine. Now, if you are with a vaccine, you're visiting somebody, you then have to multiply that attack rate by the positivity rate times if you're wearing any PPE. Your numbers go down to 0.1 to 0.0 to 0.5%. If you're doing it with severe disease, almost no chance. Hospitalized death, zero chance, right? Almost zero deaths. Talk parts per million. If you're with an unvaccinated child, a vaccinated adult, and this is why the CDC said go ahead. If you're a grandparent who's vaccinated, go ahead and see your children. You're talking about 0.02%. Down to 0.1%, so kind of 1 of 1,000, 1 in 10,000 kind of rates of chance that you're going to get infected. Severe disease even less, and hospitalization, of course, nothing. And then if you're both vaccinated, you can get. I mean, you're getting down to parts per million. So that's a really great thing. The problem is that what we don't know right now is what everybody else's. So this is vaccinated mask and vaccinated mask. So you can get a sense of how if you're both wearing N95 masks and are both vaccinated, you're in really good shape to avoid any kind of death. And this is important because often we don't know. And this is just one-on-one. Now, the problem is when we get into crowds. And so the CDC basically said, hey, if you're getting into crowds, vaccinated, unvaccinated, go ahead. If you're, we prefer outdoors, but even then, if you're indoors and you're not wearing masks, but you're both vaccinated, probably going to be safe. So that's one-on-one interactions or family to family. Pods of people who are normally getting together regularly. They said if you're unvaccinated and you're talking about a number of different a whole family, then it's lower, but we don't really like it very much. And certainly if you're with multiple mixed households, don't do that yet, because it could be that you're going to spread something The problem we got is that we inject into our muscle, right? It's an intramuscular injection. And then we hope that the immune system jumps from the muscle into our mucosal layers, because this is a respiratory disease. And our mucosal membrane actually has a slightly different immune system than the most of the rest of our body. And so that jump sometimes doesn't happen. And so you can be infected in your nose, transmitting through your nose, and still be completely, devoid of the disease inside the rest of your body. And we're still trying to figure that out. So it'll take us about a month to 2 months to figure that out. Once you figure that out, whether we can still transmit, even if we're asymptomatic or not, then that at that point you'll see a lot more openness about, okay, go ahead and take off your mask. But we don't have that data yet.
Gotcha.
It's likely. We have some suggestive data. I can show you some of that, but not yet. So the idea here is, right now the best move is to pretend that you're an asymptomatic carrier. So if you've been vaccinated,
that's kind of where I was going. Yeah.
Your best move is to say, okay, I'm asymptomatic. I could be a carrier, so I want to use the protection for these other people just in case. And the most important thing they said is risk matters. So number one, stay away from crowds, and stay away from the indoors. Try to be as creative as you can about that. Make your visits count, right? You don't want to just go to a crowded bar where you don't know anybody, but make your visits count. You see your grandmother, see people who are going to
I don't know, the big story that we were talking about last week was that apparently somebody somewhere did a study that said apparently infidelity and cheating will be on the rise along with the vaccine rollout. So apparently a lot of people will be going to bars where they're not really knowing anybody.
That's interesting. Well, if they do go to the bars, they should know what their risk levels are and what the risk levels are of people that they're hoping to hook up with, because that turns out to be really important as far as death rates go. You have to really, if you are vaccinated and you're visiting people with really high risks, and these are the risks, right? If they've got cancer and they're immunocompromised, COPD, if they got cystic fibrosis, if they've got liver diseases and so on, or diabetes type 1, which is frequent, then you really want to make sure both of you guys are wearing a mask, because that could really end in a tragedy, even though you've been vaccinated. So just some thoughts there. And then we want to take a look at the great state of Texas, right? So we had to run some numbers for these guys to find out, whether or not what would happen if Texas opened up. And interestingly, there were a whole bunch of other states that also wanted to open up. So we did it for Texas, we did it for New York, we did it for Virginia, Georgia, a couple other states where the governors were asking us. And a couple of states said we're going to back off based on the numbers we were running, and a couple of states said, full steam ahead. So here's what happens. It's sort of interesting. You don't normally see this kind of a peak. But we've got so much COVID bubbling around that if you sort of open everything up, and you've got the levels of susceptible people still in the population, what happens is you just go through a huge peak spike upward and then come right back down again. So if our calculations were we would have 200,000 extra hospitalization, and trust me, Texas can't really handle 200,000 ICU cases, certainly, and hospitalization levels, this would really hurt them a lot. If they open up April 15th, a complete stopping of all distancing, they would between April 1st and the end of the year, they'd have 194,000 cases in the hospital. If they waited though until June 1st, they'd still have a little hump, but it would really go down to 53,000. So all of a sudden you're dividing that number by 3. Just by waiting an extra 6 weeks. So we were encouraging Governor Abbott to say, let's maybe wait an extra 3, 4, 5 weeks, let this thing go through, because we are going to have a lot of variants go through, and then open things up. Go down from 200,000 to 50,000. That's a good deal. And then if you want to wait until August 1st, and that's a long way to wait, you go from 50,000 to 11,000. So that's not bad. But look at what normally in a normal year we'd only have 8,000 hospitalizations, new hospitalizations based on stuff that was circulating around that we weren't expecting beyond normal. And this extra COVID hospitalization we put up at 200,000. So this looks sort of weird, and you say we've never seen that before. But the problem is, the reason we haven't is because we aggregate the data. And when you look at Europe, for example, here's what Europe looked like, right? And they had that big spike, and they haven't gone down. And so what we did is we said, suppose we had like Europe, we had it's like 17 Texases, and each of those European states, these Texas states, open up slightly differently, relax at slightly different times, close back down again slightly different times. What could it look like? And the answer was pretty darn close to Europe.
Right.
So,
well, just from a basic science thing. I mean, that's kind of the issue, is until we hit herd immunity, until you have that saturation of a vaccinated population, however you get there, it's a giant petri dish for the virus, like everybody roaming around.
That's, and if you want, I can show you some of the work we did about around the petri dish question, and just to kind of explain it to people, because you're absolutely right. I can. So here's the
I never ever don't like hearing that I'm right, so that this is a as Bob will attest, I'm sure.
So, well, the first thing you said was Fred. It turns out we're using the same antigen with different technologies. Right? We got these different technologies. We've got the protein-based, the viral vector, the mRNA. Each different technology is quite different in the way they synthesize them. The RNA basically coats the mRNA with oil. Makes it really slippery. The oil gets into the cells, slips into the cells, and everything's fine. The J&J AstraZeneca technique is by taking an adenovirus, which you've done this before with a couple other diseases, and so it's a proven technology, not like the mRNA, which is a brand new one. We've taken these adenoviruses, and that's actually what we do is we take out the infective part of it, leave the sheath coat, which helps inject the thing in, and we put in what we're interested in, and say, okay, go ahead and make this now, and so it's a different way of delivering the same drug, same antigen to the body, and then finally, Moderna uses a big ball of proteins all full of stuff that are loaded up and create antigens also that way. So they actually don't infect the cell. They actually are on the cell that is injected in. So that's sort of different technologies.
Well, and I know, and we love we talk religion here about as much as we talk politics, but because the story came out this weekend, I wanted to ask. Yeah. There was basically a pronouncement from the Catholic Church that came out that said, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has in its origin, in its lineage, stem cell or cells that were obtained through a fetal abortion. Don't get it.
Yes, so that was the Church of New Orleans, as I recall,
right?
Of New Orleans, and that countermanded the Pope's decree, which said J&J's vaccine was just fine.
Wow, I would think the Pope wins. The Pope should win, right? The Pope
should win. And so here's what happened. Basically, what we do is we grow what we're interested in cell lines. And the problem with human cell lines is they die. And the thing that stops the cell lines from dying is if they're stem cells. The stem cells last forever. They can kind of continually reproduce and produce the antigen that we're interested in. Well, J&J created their cell lines from someone voluntarily had an abortion, and that was in 1970.
I was just going to say, I think I read somewhere that it was like as far like the late 60s or early 70s. Yeah.
1970. Yep. And this was in the Netherlands.
So let's be clear. 51 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, 51 years ago, and in the Netherlands at that time, it was for cause. They were quite rigid about the reasons people were having abortions.
Right.
And so there was they took some of the cell lines from the retinal cell of the fetus, so those of the developing eye, and they used that as a basis for the way they're going to grow the antigen. And so unfortunately, that cell line is used for a number of different vaccines that are produced today, not just by J&J, but by all. This is we really restricted the amount of embryonic cell line use that we allowed, and so we really restricted that significantly. And so there are a lot of different manufacturers who use the cell line to grow their cells. Today, we can do this. We can do this without actually any fetal tissue at all. So we've really accelerated our technology. But of course, once you created your manufacturing operations, you can't go back to the regulators and say, by the way, we're going to shut everything down, reintroduce a brand new thing, and the regulators are going to say, well, that'll take you 5 years to reestablish our trust, and they have to redo all their clinical trials, and so they haven't done that.
So I think you may have already answered this question, but I'll ask. Our buddy Jamie just chimed in and wanted to know if you've gotten the vaccine, and if so, which one? And I think you said
I've gotten the vaccine, and I got the Pfizer vaccine.
Okay.
My daughter got the J&J vaccine just the other day. So we're completely and my mother got the Moderna vaccine. So we're completely
okay.
So we're pretty neutral on our side of the equation. But yeah, it was just random. I was at Grosse Pointe and I went to the Kroger, and we were just lucky. My wife got the appointment, and we zipped down and got it. It was just happened to be Pfizer. But and each of those, of course, injects the same antigen. You've seen this slide before I showed you, and you can see everyone's using the same antigen. And so the problem is that because we're using the same antigen, the reason we use it is because we think, that's the piece, that spike protein attaches to our cells. So it can't change too much, or it can't attach to our cells, right? We're pretty specific here about how, well, it turns out, sadly, that for some wild reason, and it's because this virus is still evolving, we caught it, that in fact, the spike protein is mutating at twice the rate of the rest of the virus, and the binding region is the binding, which is the most sensitive part of this, the RBD and
you're really not helping the Earth is just done with us theory.
So basically, the area we thought should be most conserved is actually most plastic. And so we've got this binding region mutating at 4 times the speed of the rest of the virus. Absolutely wild situation. And the most important thing I can say is that there are a lot of guys out there who says, I'm a strong guy, my body will handle it.
Right.
Well, the problem is that you're trying to beat biology, right? It turns out that the virus, replicates so many times in your body so fast and has such a small amount of DNA. It's only 30,000 base pairs of DNA. You got, versus a mammal like the mouse with millions and millions of base pairs, that a small mutational change, and you're replicating so many times, right? They're going to reproduce, in a couple hours, you could have, several thousand replications versus you waiting, 18 years or so to replicate.
Well, and I honestly, that was one of the points that I made in my post that I shared yesterday when I was sharing my memories of a year ago and that kind of stuff was the thing that people need to understand is just because you're over it and you're done and bored with this doesn't mean that nature is over it. It doesn't mean that the virus is bored. And that's the sad reality is that nature, like this virus, can be patient and just wait for you to do something stupid.
It'll outweigh you. Absolutely right. And the point of this slide is if you got a really big genome like us mammals, like humans, and you're expecting a small mutational change that happens in your own cells to be able to overwhelm a little virus that's replicating many times faster than you, and each mutation and it has lots more mutations than you. It's going to change and adapt faster than your body can, and that's the bottom line. So if once you get this thing, your body's not going to be able to respond fast enough, if that makes sense. It's replicating too fast. It's got too many genes, too many mutations, and your body just can't keep up with that rate of speed at a very simplified level of the science. And what's interesting is, of course, here is what happens with the overall. This is the family tree of the virus right here on the left hand side, and you can get a sense of where if you're into phylogenetic dynamics, you look at this and you go, whoa, because those straight lines mean a lot of exponential growth.
Yep.
So we're talking about a lot of exponential growth of this virus, and the fact that you don't have mixing of the red, orange, yellow, and blues means it's a lot harder to attack. If you got lots of mixing, then you can start to.
Well, yeah, because it just means there's a lot of uniqueness.
That's right. It's very unique. They're evolving separately, and then of course we travel around the world as humans, coughing on each other on international airplanes, and we're going to get the stuff right. And so, sure enough, we've got the Brazilian virus in 5 states at least. We're not even measuring it. We got 40. I think the UK variant is in 48 states already. So I mean, it's just. it's just going too fast for us to stop it.
Well, and that's when we were talking earlier. You said I think it's the 117. That got a foothold here in Michigan.
Yep. So Michigan is the third worst state for B117. Luckily, it's all contained in a prison in Ionia. I shouldn't quite say. I'm being a little bit flip.
No, I get it. Yeah.
but yes, sadly, for the prisoners, of the 200 or so cases, 157 of them are in that prison, and then we have 50 that are in that county. So if you look at Michigan, it's like a bright red dot, and then the rest of the state doesn't have that much. I think in Ann Arbor we've got about 20 cases, something like that. But the B117 is. Actually, I'll get to it in a second. The B117 actually is not as bad a situation as some of the others it could be, and I'll show you why in a second. I just wanted to show you the fight that we're having. It's sort of like a war game. If you're playing video games and you're looking for superpowers, we got some and they got some, right?
You just woke Bob up.
So here's the war game, right? We got our masks, we got our swords, we got tests, we got contact tracing, we got sequencing, we got ventilation, and we got the vaccines, we got some good medicines, and that sort of we get these superpowers every once in a while, and then we got the virus also has got some superpowers, right? It starts to mutate and find, and it basically we start to select for these powers that allow the virus to infect fast, actually. Lengthen the time of infectivity. So we've gone from 4 days average infectivity to 8 or 9 days infectivity with these new variants. We've got and you're coughing up more particles per cough than originally. I'll show you that in a second. Then they're binding much more tightly to our ACE2 and ACE2 sites in our cells, and so that when they bind that tightly, that's going to get them a faster and surer injection into our cells of their mRNA. And then of course they're stealthy. They're full of sugars, and they sort of hide out so that your immune system doesn't see them, and they go and attack at the last minute with their spikes. And of course, they've got all sorts of ways of increasing their transfection rates in the thing. So we start to see this fight going on with us having stuff and them having stuff. We'll put on masks. Okay, well, we'll have longer and better infectivity. And of course, the trick is the virus keeps wanting to reproduce. It wants to basically have a happy time in your body. And so the problem is right now, over 100 countries in the world, this is a global pandemic, haven't had one vaccinated shot yet. Not one shot. Wow. All the children, of course, don't have haven't been injected yet. And of course, the immunocompromised, that's a whole other area I'll get into in a second. So we got this, that Swiss cheese approach we talked about, right? Where you've got a whole bunch of layers of protection that we need to have, because there's no one that's a perfect tool set. So the first layer is the prophylactic layer. We want to make sure that you got a vaccine that works, and so if that happens, then you're protected before it even gets into your body. Then you want to be, if it gets through, if you're worried about, gosh, maybe it can get through, then you want to at least be aware of all your risk levels and understand that. Then you want to start socially distanced and finally want a mask, and so then you want to have to test. By the time,
I love the brewery that posted a sign on their front door that said our new surcharge structure is $50 if we have to explain why masks are mandatory, and then an additional $75 if we have to listen to you explain why they aren't.
Yeah, I mean it's sort of obvious, right? You put something in front of your mouth, you're not going to be spreading it, but and it doesn't matter, what party you're from. It doesn't matter, whether you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter about anything. It's sort of the basic physics. So so basically, they have created these new things. And here's, for example, originally, this is the first big variant battle, right? Was the D614 against the G614, and so what happened was, California had that D614, right? These guys were coming over from China, infected us, and we had the D614 variant. And it wasn't that effective. You can get a sense of, see the little orange particles coming off. Not
right.
Too bad. New York, meanwhile, on the New York side, it turned out that the Wuhan virus went to Europe first, got real strong, and then came over to us. So New York was fighting this thing in the blue, and it was just killing us, right, for a long time. So we were wondering, gosh, why is California doing so well? New York's just crappy. And the reason was because they're fighting something different. so that end of that. So they got more particles for longer. Then they're stealthier. So you can get a sense that as they get these sugars around them, as they start to change shape, these antibodies, little Y-shaped antibodies you see there on the first square, and then right in the middle of the page, that's supposed to glom on to these particles. And stop and make them heavy and not be able to infect the ACE2 receptor. Well, unfortunately, the new particles were so different than the original Wuhan virus that the antibodies we created for the Wuhan virus didn't stick to the new ones. And so now it's got free access to the ACE2 receptor. And by the way, it's a lot stickier to the ACE2 receptor because of these mutations. And so it sticks there better, and then it injects you. And you can see all these cellular processes also start to get faster and faster. And so you get a lot more power in the vaccine. And so as we moved in one direction, the virus is counteracting us through selection in the other direction. So that's the battle. And right now, I think actually we have a little bit of a lead with our vaccines. Our vaccines are so strong, and our immune systems are so boosted that for anything that's pretty close to the Wuhan virus, we're going to get it. And the problem is that what the virus is doing is it's stacking all these mutations. So basically, it's not just one mutation that you got to worry about for longer transmission, not just one neutralizing antibody resistance, not just one virulence strengthener. These guys are, putting on their cloaks of invisibility, plus they've got their wands out and swords out in 16 different directions, and it's stacking up on them. So in other words, these
Dungeons and Dragons nerds.
Exactly, the Dungeons and Dragons come through. Some video games come through. There were people were talking about a video game that I haven't played. Sadly, I can only imagine what it was like, where you've got special capabilities as you move up the capabilities. That's just what the virus is doing. It's adding these little capabilities and trying to.
Hey, Fred.
Yes.
Stu. I don't know if this is a stupid question or this is just something I've heard, and you're my voice of reason, so I just want to kind of dispel it. Or is what we're doing long term bad for us? Meaning all of this hand sanitizer and social distancing and masking, not the masking, but the social distancing. Aren't we supposed to build natural? And I'm not on one side or the other. I'm just curious to what your take is on it. That we're supposed to kind of eat dirt once in a while to keep our natural immunities going.
Yeah. So if you want to get rid of COVID for 8 or 9 months, just go out and get yourself infected, and then you'll have 8 or 9 months of protection at about 50% rate. Or you can go get a vaccine and be protected for 9 months at 95% protection and probably longer, because you're talking about an order of magnitude, 2 orders of magnitude more protection with a vaccine than just getting naturally, eating the dirt and getting naturally infected. And the problem.
No, but what I meant was, what I meant was like long term. Like I'm not talking now.
Long term.
I'm talking like in 2 years, 3 years, right? Are we supposed to build a natural immunity, or does that it's kind of like the liver? It cleanses itself. Like what? I was always under the impression that you got to get dirty once in a while to build your body's immunity system up.
Yes, but it doesn't quite work that way. There were So basically, the answer for this.
Well, I tell you what, I think Jamie just chimed in and summed it up, and he said basically we're worried about superbugs with all the sanitizing, like in hospitals.
Right. And so I'll talk to you about superbugs in a second. But the idea here is that what the virus is doing, it isn't creating just one big mutation. It's creating a whole series of small mutations that are harder for us to fight. And slowly but surely, it's gaining a capability that may allow it to escape, what they call escape the vaccine. And so that's what we're worried about right now. And the unfortunate thing about this is the way we monitor this is actually through genetic sequencing, and we don't do enough of it. We only genetically sequence 0.23% of our positive tests. So you can imagine just how much, unknowledge, how blindly we're flying. Right, we have no idea where these variants are, what quantity, whether they're dangerous or not, what the mutations are in the United States. England is doing a much better job. Australia's got 60%, actually sequences 60% of everything that's positive in the country. So
well, I mean,
0.25.
Well, and I mean, to some degree, isn't this the difference? Like, so, and I think we've talked about this before, where, so, like, when it comes to what makes it to be a pandemic,
Right.
And so like we've talked about, so like Ebola will never be a pandemic because it burns through people and kills them off too quickly.
Yep.
The
Same
common
thing with SARS.
cold, the common cold will never be a pandemic because it doesn't have the capability of killing people, but it spreads very rapidly. Whereas here you have something in the sweet spot, that and I use that term loosely, but in the sweet spot from the viral perspective, where it can do enough damage that either A, it can kill you, or B, it can leave you with all these long hauler symptoms that we're still learning about and hearing about and that kind of stuff. And it has the capability of spreading quickly. And so I think where Bob's getting is, and actually I think Bob, you're kind of getting to what Fred was getting to earlier about the importance of hitting that herd immunity standpoint, is that if we don't stay ahead of it, and we do, it's like, send the old days, like when we were kids, send your kids. Okay, little Johnny has chicken pox. All the kids go to Johnny's house for a sleepover to get chicken pox because it's no big deal. Well, when little Johnny got the flu, the parents didn't send the kids over. If little Johnny got the measles, the parents didn't send the kids over because the effects were a little bit more severe.
Yeah, measles will kill you. Measles killed up until the 1940s or so. Measles killed 2.6 million children a year. It's a deadly disease. It spreads super rapidly.
Well, and I may be vastly oversimplifying, but I think that's where Bob was going.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. For some things, and I'll talk about superbugs in a second. I wanted to get to your point, which was eradication versus what they call an endemic environment, and there are two different kinds of goals that we're going after. And the endemic environment, we're talking about, we're just going to have to live with this thing, and that's what we do with the common cold. That's what we do with the flu. It's become endemic. Versus eradication, like smallpox, polio, we've actually gotten rid of them. And that's a very different kind of goal that we've got. And you can see that basically your vaccine uptake is low to high on the right-hand axis, and then basically our ability to deploy MPI systems. We're not very good at MPI systems. I don't need to tell you. We have enough deaths and illnesses. Even though I think even though we think we're pretty good, you should go to Taiwan. You should go to China. You should go to like Australia. Those guys really know how to deploy. Singapore. Those guys really know how to deploy non-pharmaceutical systems. They're down in three or four infections per 100,000, and we're up at 200. So that gives you a sense of how much better they are than we are at that, because they're used to it. They're used to trying to fight off these things. They have one of these bad epidemics floating through their systems every couple of years. This is the first time we've had it in 100 years. So they've got a reason for being a little better. But at any rate, you can get a sense of the path I think we're going to follow. We're going to follow. January, we're down here. We're coming up this here right now. 10% of the people in the United States have had both courses of the vaccine, dual dose or a single dose of J&J, and we're moving up to the summer, and we're now starting to relax our NPI systems, our non-pharmaceutical systems. So we're going to start from a point of being over to the left a little bit. We're wondering how far over we're going to go, and then once we get some control, then we can move up into the green area. And the green area is two visions. One is control versus eradication. That's what Bob was saying, was can we get to a point of eradicating this, or are we just going to have to live with a stupid thing? And the answer is, for China or Taiwan, you can see Taiwan just has to go straight up. They don't have to go through all this finagling that we do. They actually are going to want to try to eradicate. But for us, we're going to be happy enough with control. And people are saying, okay, that means we're in an endemic environment. And you can see we got three kind of scenarios on the.
Do me a favor, go back a slide. I just want to make sure I read a date right.
Yes.
That says 2027.
2020 question mark 20.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. No, we should be. Oh my gosh. No. We should be. Holy cow.
Okay.
Don't do that to people. What are you doing?
Well, that's why I wanted to clarify, because now I see when I just looked at it quick, I thought it said 2027, and I was like, Mother of God.
Oh yeah, no. If we're stupid and we keep going back and forth and don't mask and we think we're controlling transmission and we're not with vaccines, we could be 2030, 2040 if we're really stupid. I don't think we're going to be that way though. I think we're going to be I think we're going to have a scare. April, May.
You have so much more faith in people than I do.
Well, we've screwed up testing. We've screwed up masking. We could screw up vaccinations. I hope we don't. I'm working on that team, so we're trying to get this thing out fast. And I think we're going to be up at like 4.2 million doses at our peak. probably in May, June, which would be great, and then we'll start to hit the point where people say, I don't really want the vaccine, thank you very much. But everyone who wants one, I think, as Joe Biden said, May 1st, we'll open up the demand. It'll be on demand.
And then if we behave, we can have a barbecue on the 4th of July.
Then if we behave, we can have barbecue on 4th of July, but only with your family and stay outdoors. He said purposely a barbecue, and don't invite a lot of people, right? And no crowds. Yeah, so we're still going to be. It's sort of like you remember you're playing pond hockey and and you're in your skates and you let the little guy go out first and you sort of tap it, okay.
Right. Yeah. Check the ice. Yeah.
You don't want to be the first big heavy guy out there on the ice. You want not in the middle of the pond, right? You want to sort of go out there slow. That's what we're doing. We're going to go out there slow. Take too much risk. So at any rate, and as Bob said, so the idea is is it going to be burning out like SARS or like Ebola did? That's eradication, right? It kills itself. Or we can have a great vaccine like we had for smallpox or polio or others, and that's completely sanitizing. Now, at the endemic level, then we're having to live with this thing. So we're living, for example, with a sanitizing vaccine with no escape. That's polio, that's smallpox. So that's fine. We got a great vaccine. It's permanent, and we're going to do a good job. Where you see the issues are when you continually get infected at a low rate when you're a child, and then when you're an adult, you still get the sniffles. But all the other COVID, about 15% of our colds are related to a COVID virus. And so what happens is, as a young child, you get the cold. You don't have too many, because of the nature of the COVID. You don't have too much of a symptom. And then as you get older, you're cross immunized. And so you get a much lower kind of dose of a bad disease. A lot of our colds probably started out as something pretty bad and then slowly got diluted down. And then we have the influenza vaccine. Influenza is sort of interesting. I don't know if you know about this, but it's at Roche we had the only kind of cures. I was responsible for these product lines, and we called it the birds. And the reason we called it because we weren't sure whether our profitability would be $500 million higher or lower any given year, because it all depended on the birds. And if the birds were good to us, it means we had a bad flu season, and we'd use lots of our Tamiflu, lots of our diseases. Because it turns out that what happens is we're pretty good at creating vaccines for the flu, but that those vaccines are either between 10 and 60% effective. Right. And the reason is because we have to decide 6 months in advance which strains are likely to be the ones we're going to have to fight in September. And the way we predict this is we look at the rate of avian flu in the southern hemisphere for northern hemisphere, and vice versa, 6 months in advance for the southern hemisphere. And then we look at the birds, and the birds, and then the birds go and they start to infect us. And we don't really know, when you jump from a bird to a human, which ones are going to work and which ones aren't going to work. So what's our best guess on which ones are going to jump? But since it's in all these birds and they're flying all over the place, it's hard to define when and what is going to hit us. And that's why the flu is so hard to control. So just a little side note.
Well, because and I guess, to your point, it's because it's consistently mutating, like we're seeing with this.
That's right. And so and flu is even worse on the mutation side than COVID. COVID's a little bit more stable than the flu. It's actually about 10 times more stable than the flu. The flu mutates about 4 to 5 times in a month. This one mutates about 1 to 2 times a month. In every 10 generations, you'll see a significant mutation in the COVID. So at any rate, we asked all these epidemiologists, so what's gonna, what do you think? And they said 89% of them said it's not going to burn itself out. It's going to become endemic. We're going to have to live with this thing. At some level, we're going to have some level of deaths for the foreseeable future. That means for as long as you and I live, probably. Right. And the reason for it was these that were what they thought were these 5 or 6 areas, right? They thought there was going to be escape because there were going to be variants, right? They said the variants are going to get clever, and they're going to win some of those battles that we looked at earlier. They said it was going to be waning immunity, so our vaccines aren't going to last forever. They said that there's going to be uneven vaccine distribution. I'll show you about that in a second. That's sort of interesting. Right? We got guys in Africa not being able to afford the shot, so they fly over and visit us, or they're to do business, to visit their family, and I shouldn't pick on Africa. Actually, it'll probably be Europe and Japan and other places as well. But we've got a lot of cross pollination that causes and some of these communities, some of the countries are going to be better vaccinated, protected than others. Then we have the hesitancy question, and luckily in the United States it's coming down, but in Europe it's going up. And so we're going to have issues with that. And then we have the lack of political will. We saw that in Brazil in spades. Right now, Brazil is the only country worse than us right now as far as daily case rates in the world. It finally surpassed us, which is not a good thing to be, obviously, but that's a lack of political will. And then animal reservoirs, which we haven't really talked about, which I talked about with the flu, with the birds. There are a number of animal species, including our own pets, that can carry a coronavirus. So those are some of the things that the epidemiologists are worried about right now. And with that, I should show you what. So now one of the more important questions that you had was, okay, so how do these bad variants come up? And the answer is, we think that the worst variants come up as a result of our immunocompromised people. What happens is you're immunocompromised, you get the bug, and then you sort of control it with lots of medicine, right? We throw everything we got at this thing, the best stuff we've got, and slowly but surely you get better. And then you go back in the world, and it turns out you haven't really killed the thing off, and so it comes back, and this time you've killed off all the things that are best medicines.
Well, yeah, because you've now taught it how to deal with that.
Yeah. And we think that's what happened in Europe for the B117 virus. There was a guy, one sick person in Cambridge Hospital, 102 days of having COVID. He went through 3 different episodes, and at the end of the 3rd episode, he finally sadly died at day 102. By that time, though, the bugs had had so many mutations and were so powerful that he spread it just to a couple people, and it just zipped through the whole country. And now, get this, the rest of Europe is on fire with B117 because they haven't gotten their vaccinations yet. It turns out our vaccines that we're taking right now, our Pfizer vaccine or J&J vaccine, are going to protect us from that particular variant. Okay. It doesn't protect Europe, and they're only 6% vaccinated. We're about 28% for the first for the first dose of vaccinations, and UK is at 35% vaccination rate. So we're somewhat protected from that problem. But get this, in South Africa, same kind of thing came up again, and they have a lot of HIV cases, a lot of immunocompromised cases down there. Great breeding ground. In the United States right now, we've got 10 million immunocompromised people. And if you look at our best-selling drugs, most of them are things like Humira, Remicade, Skyrizi, all these things that are for anti-arthritis, all these things that are for avoiding skin rash and so on. Those are immunomodulators. And they reduce your immune response, right? At the end of those ads, you see, try to avoid infections because they'll get really bad really fast if you're on these drugs. And we have a lot of people, many more than we really think about, who are on these drugs that could really cultivate these superbugs. So that's a little bit about the superbugs. The question is, how bad could it get? It has 30,000 genes. We've looked at 4,000 potential genes that could confer fitness if they mutated properly. Of those, we thought probably 100 of them are going to be important, and of those, we've seen 30. So it still has a ways to go before we see the ultimate superbug. What's nice about it, though, is I think we can keep ahead. I think we can keep ahead with the way we're doing our vaccines, with the mRNA vaccines, where right now it takes us. I can show you that. Actually, it takes us about. So here is the mRNA vaccine, how long it takes. So if we go on so you're right about your thought was we'll probably have to have another booster at the end of the year. The answer is yeah, you'll have to. Probably, yeah. And it'll be one of 2 options. Of 3 options. The first option is you get the same thing you had before. So if you had a J&J vaccine, expect to get a second, probably be told you'll need a second one, probably October timeframe. If you've had 2 Moderna or 2 Pfizer, expect the same timeframe, October or so, to be told you're going to need to get a third one of these this year in order to get your immune system boosted up to beat the virus during its peak of seasonality when we're all cooped up inside. So that's one option, the same vaccine, giving yourself a boost. Second option would be that we have just a vaccine for the variant. So we say, it's this variant. And right now, Moderna has already, in phase 1 trial, just something especially for the South African variant, the 1351 variant that you hear a little bit about. And it took them 66 days to go from, okay, let's select this thing to create an antigen. And they're already in phase 1 testing. So if you do all those trials, you can get a sense of, and by July, they'll be ready with an FDA supplemental licensure, and they'll be manufacturing. So the thing that Pfizer and Moderna are thinking about right now is which manufacturing setup should we have? Should we set ourselves up for continuation of a big booster, or should we try to go after the variant? And they're going to have to make this decision by May in order to get us ready for September and get the release in time. That gives you but that's not bad, right? Now, if we have a pandemic and it turns out these variants get out of control, then you have to go a lot faster. We can get these things out instead of 9 months, probably in about 6 months, using a different FDA approval process, the emergency use authorization, which is what these are currently under. Not instead of a licensure, we'll do emergency use. The nice thing about, the thing about emergency use that's different than licensure is if it's licensed, then your employer, your school systems can start to, by law, they can start to actually say, you have to take this in order to keep your job. If it's under emergency use, then they can't do that. It's still under emergency. It's still not a licensed product. So there's some regulation things that are kind of going to get into the game here. But you can get a sense that
where does HIPAA fall in this, Fred?
HIPAA. So HIPAA is about information release. And
when you're talking about needing it to work. Isn't that kind of a medical history record thing? Doesn't it fall? I'm just curious if it falls under that.
So there's a lot. So let me get to that in 1 second.
No worries.
The answer is it does matter, and there are some interesting laws that are coming about. But basically, I just wanted to complete this thought here. mRNA are going to have no trouble keeping up, right? So we'll have at least one, I think, medicine, one virus vaccine that will be able to keep up with the viral variants, from what we see so far. J&J will be able just barely to keep up. It'll be on a 12-month cycle versus the mRNA, which will be on a 6-month cycle. And I think the protein subunits, if they don't get some help by stocking some specials, leaving some manufacturing capacity on the side and so on, they're going to be the ones that are most pressured. But I think under normal circumstances, we'll have at least 3 good technologies that are proven to be available to fight the variants if we're on a normal annual cycle. So that's the good news. So on the question of HIPAA, so there's a whole question about vaccine passports. Right, that some of this gets to, and there are a whole bunch of countries right now. If you go to Israel, for example, they've got a very active vaccination process on about, I should know this, 58%, as I recall. I'm working with the government. I can't remember the number. I remember the actual numbers, but about 58% have been vaccinated, and so the result of that is that if you have your special green pass and you say, hey, I've been vaccinated, then they will let you go through. To travel without taking any tests. If you don't have a green pass and you can't prove that you've been vaccinated, then they'll say, okay, it's fine, but you got to have it. You have to stand here for 15 minutes and get your test. Get a test result. And so my sense is that people will want to have the vaccine just for convenience purposes. If you want to start going to venues that are requiring either a pass or a check in the box. If you're on international travel, this will be for sure the case. And slowly what will happen is either, we'll start to really gain control and it won't be such a big issue, or it'll become a bigger issue as variants become more and more powerful, and we'll actually say which vaccine were you on and how old is it, and can you take a serology test to demonstrate how many antibody levels you're at? It won't be required necessarily, but if you don't or you can't produce the results, then you probably will be restricted.
Well, and I think that was a story we talked about probably a couple months ago now, Bob, if I recall correctly, was, Ticketmaster was looking at integrating with some third-party app that would, basically identify as to whether or not you were, if you, and that was our question then was, okay, well, wait, now I have to allow my medical records to get accessed by some third-party app. What the hell?
Right, exactly.
That's right. So yeah, HIPAA is something that is in your control. What's nice about HIPAA is it says if you're the patient, you're allowed to get, and that's why you sign off. You go to the doctor and say, would you let Dr. Jones see your medical records? And if you say no, Dr. Jones has no chance of seeing your medical records. But if you sign off, say yeah, they can look at it. That's your right to give your medical record up. That's what HIPAA says. You have a right to be able to stop the medical record from moving to a certain person, or to say yes, I authorize that person. Otherwise, they're unauthorized to see it, and the data has to be de-identified. If it's de-identified, then we get a sense of what's going on at a population level. You can't ever figure out, oh, it's that Fred guy who's the problem here. So that's what HIPAA lets us do. And what we're trying, what some are happening is there's special anti-vaccination protection bills that are in 11 states now that are in place. And I actually consult with some of these states. And the protection bills say basically, look, if I don't want to have a vaccine, my rights should be protected. I should have a right over what goes into my body, so there are bills in states, and I think it's going to grow as something that says we want to protect. The issue is if it's a child and they want to go to school, for example, there is a community interest in making sure a certain number of people have been vaccinated. If we get to a point where there's enough people who have been vaccinated that it doesn't matter that a few people decide not to vaccinate because we have herd immunity at that point, then this shouldn't be too big of an issue. But if these groups, if these laws prevent us from achieving herd immunity, then it becomes a matter of public interest. It isn't just your own personal piece. It actually is affecting everybody and the health of everybody. Then we're going to have to look at this more carefully. So we'll see what happens as thing goes on. But basically, we're having gaps. We're projecting that we're going to have gaps in the areas of people that are vaccinated, and these gaps are going to come from 3 different sources, at least, possibly more. But the first one is that you have the anti-vax bills. These are actually legal issues. The second is that there are different states. And sometimes having different laws from different states helps you, because it's good sometimes to have very concentrated personalization of the medicine. Unfortunately, in our case, it means it's hard for us to communicate to another. We can't. There are no standards set up. There are no ways of sharing data across state lines particularly effectively. And a lot like Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas can't talk to each other. These kinds of problems are actually hindering us. So that the fact that we've got states that aren't coordinated actually is a little bit challenging, and as a result of that, certain states will have higher levels of risk than other states. Different parts of the states will have different parts of risk. One of the questions today was, what about people who want to come visit in Michigan? And it turns out that if you look at the patterns that are happening in Michigan right now, those patterns indicate that we have very good ability to deliver vaccines all over the state, especially in the northern part of the state. The ratio of pharmacies and distributor capabilities in the northern part of Michigan are better on a per capita basis than they are in the Detroit area and the big cities. But if you look at the actual pattern of vaccinations, the northern parts of Michigan, where we are kind of depending on tourism, actually are really low. So despite the fact that we've got lots of access, people don't, for some reason, are saying in the northern part of Michigan, I don't want to be vaccinated. The problem then is if you got a lot of tourists who want to come and visit, they won't come and visit if they see that our vaccination rates are really low, and it could hurt our tourism industry if we don't get our vaccination into it. So that's sort of some of the things that are happening with these clusters.
And not only that, I mean, this is Michigan. We are approaching the end of snowbird season. Which means they're all going to be coming back from where? Florida.
And you know what they got in Florida? They have the B117 virus over by 8th of March. They went over 50% on B117. And what happened with B117 is in Denmark And in the rest of Europe, that's what happened with the UK. The B117 came from UK over to Denmark and then the rest of Europe. And what happens is B117 actually infects children a lot more readily than the regular virus. And so all their schools were open. All these older people, the grandparents had all been vaccinated. All the parents hadn't been vaccinated. So what happened? The school children all got B117 variant. Their parents hadn't been vaccinated yet for the virus, and now they have huge outbreaks all through Europe because they're not ready for the B117 virus. And the problem with the B117 virus is that you think you're safe, right? Hey, I use this mask for for the last 3 months. Everything's great. I did it. I went to the store. I didn't have any problem, so I can keep doing this. And the answer is no, you can't. Sadly, the B117 virus is 50% more infectious, 54% more transmittable, and kills you at 20% faster rate. So if you use the same old, rules that you did in the past for this new variant, it'll kill you. And that's the problem that we're having in Europe. And now Florida has a 50% rate of the B117 virus. And all those people are going to come up to Michigan. And we already have the Iona City Jail. This is the jail problem in Iona. So we're the third largest state for the B117 virus. And this is just going to really add to the fire. And it could make us look like, what Europe looks like now. Anyway, the last big cluster is a socioeconomic cluster, right? So if you are, if you're an Asian, for let's say I play bridge, so I'm with my bridge group, and I'll tell you the average age of my bridge group is like 87 years old. So I'm looking at that saying, hey, that's pretty cool. I these guys are all going to be vaccinated, so I can play bridge all I like. If I go and play, ultimate frisbee with a bunch of
you're the young whippersnapper.
I am the young whippersnapper. I love it. So, right, but if I go and play ultimate frisbee with a whole bunch of 20-year-olds, I'm down. If you look at that age number, you can see that only like 60%, if that, are going to be vaccinated. So it's a completely different, and these clusters of people are going to separate, and you'll have, and so on average, what happens. And this actually happens with us with measles. On average, we'll say we're 85% vaccinated. Isn't that great? So we're all safe. And the answer is not really, because we've got some states that are, that are more vaccinated than others. We've got some communities that are more vaccinated than others. And so what happens is what happened with us in measles. And I don't know, this was measles. This was in 2018. And I don't know if you know about this, but basically, the vaccination rates in the United States are pretty good. There are a lot of dark blues in there, and Michigan, southeastern Michigan, look, that's a dark blue area. That means thumbs up. We got heavy vaccination rate. But if you focus in on Oakland County, this is real data. Focus in on Oakland County, it looks like it's a dark blue. We're set to go. You get in the congressional districts, got some separation. School districts, you got that white spot, nothing. Census tracts, even more white spots. You get down to the block groups, and we're on fire, even though it's measles, where we got like 92% coverage on average. So these average pieces really don't work for herd immunity.
Kind of lull you into a false sense of security, yeah.
Exactly, and then you have the beer muscles, and you go out and you get sick. And so that's some of the things to worry about. Anyway, to think about anyway when as we move through this period. Trying to see if it. So there's one other thing I was going to talk about. And that is maybe it's helpful just to understand this a little bit better. There are three different kinds of, so whenever we talked about efficacy, we're 95% efficacious. Very cool, right? Excellent. We're 95% efficacious. The problem is that people think about,
now you're gonna tell us why that's not good.
No, that's great. The problem. This is the best vaccine I ever worked with, right? No, it's a fabulous thing. The problem is, though, that the way we think about efficacy is that it means, hey, that means it works 95% of the time, right? Or 95% effectiveness. So there's a difference between efficacy, which we study in clinical trials, and real world effectiveness, which is what we're all interested in ourselves. And there are three components to efficacy. So we can test for whether it reduces disease pathology, and that's what we did, right? Some people got placebo, some people got active ingredient. We injected them, let them go out in the world. People got sick. We looked at it and said, aha, 95% of the time it was the people who got the water, And only 5% of the time, the people who got sick were the ones that were injected with the vaccine. 95% reduction in clinical pathology. No more sniffles for us. No more severe disease. No more hospitalizations, right? But it doesn't really tell you whether or not you're actually reducing transmission spread. Now, typically these are a little bit related, but as I said, you can be completely protected in your body and still have lots of transmittable virus in your nose, because you have two different kind of parts of your immune system, the mucosal membranes versus the lymphatic system. And they're different, they work differently. And then finally, the last big question is, can you avoid getting reinfected again? And that's really actually the biggest and most important question, because if you can constantly get reinfected, that means the virus has chances to reproduce, has chances to create variants, and so on. So we know really well that we're probably protected the best for our weakest level of protection, our weakest overall effectiveness measure. So now we're trying to get in to see whether or not, and so if all we have is something that can reduce disease pathology, what happens is what we monitor is whether we're actually injecting everybody who could get a really bad severe disease, right? If you start to inject all the old people who are gonna die if they get this, and don't inject so much the young people who are gonna, as Bob said, eat some dirt and get natural immunity, slowly but surely you sort of dilute the virus out. And that takes 10 plus years to do, but after a while you don't have to worry about people dying. All you worry about is people being infected. And there you kind of want to your best response is to have an annual variant vaccine, and that's the course we're on right now. But if you're able to reduce transmission, that's the middle circle, and there you want to actually monitor exactly what is going on with community vaccination levels and what the variant is, the variants of concern, the VOC prevalence levels. Now, we're not set up to do that today. We don't have enough genetic sequencing capability out there to really know whether we're reducing transmission spread around the variants. And so what we're doing in the UK, and we have some data from Israel, I'll show you that in a second. But basically here, you just want, and that's why all the big companies are saying, let's manufacture and test a booster shot. So J&J has a test has going out right now and testing boosters. AstraZeneca is going out testing boosters. Everyone's going out testing boosters of the same vaccine. And that's because they think they're going to have a chance of reducing transmission as long as they keep the antibody levels that these current vaccines are doing at the right level. But the best thing you can have is actually protection against reinfection. If you have that, then you have to, but in order to know that you're doing that, you have to understand what the reinfection rates are, which we can't figure out yet because we're not contact tracing anybody. We don't actually even know what our real infection rates are. We don't do enough antigen testing, et cetera. And then what happens is all you do is you inject the children with a universal COVID booster, and you're done. For the rest of your life, you're going to be fine, because you can't ever get reinfected, and you don't ever get the kind of viral load that you need in order to continue the propagation of all these different variants. So here's what the data looks like. In Israel, we thought, aha, we're reducing transmission. But it's real world data. And so what happened was they tested like 500,000 people in two different groups. So over 1 million people, as I recall, were looked at. And they said, aha, 12,000 people were infected if they didn't have the vaccine, and only 250 people were infected when they did have the vaccine out of 500,000. So that means we're 4.6% effective. And what happened was, unfortunately, if you weren't vaccinated, you had to be tested all the time. Every time you went out of your apartment building, you were tested, because people were terrified about whether you're going to transmit the disease or not.
That's less than convenient,
right? So you're constantly being tested, and so the result was that all these vaccinated people were, of course, coming up with asymptomatic conditions. So they were getting a large number of people saying, "Yeah, I got sick." Meanwhile, if you were vaccinated, you just flashed your green pass, and you didn't have to go through any testing. So the result of that was that all these people basically walked around. If they had sniffles, they had this and that, they show the green pass wouldn't be tested. So the problem was, all we did was recapitulate the fact that we were reducing symptoms. So we basically redid our real world, our clinical test in the real world, and rediscovered that we're about 95% effective. Good news. It's great to have reproducible results, but it doesn't show that we actually reduce transmission. So what we're going to do, actually, believe it or not, we're going to go in the UK. They actually authorize this. I don't know how. They're going to take 200 people. 100 of them are going to be unvaccinated and be exposed to the virus purposefully.
I mean, that okay.
And then 100 people, the 100 other people are going to be vaccinated and exposed to the virus. And they're going to try to figure out exactly how much virus needs to get into your nose before you get sick. And they're going to actually measure that. I'd hate to be the person who gets people to sign up for that, because I would really feel guilty if the guy came down with a deadly case of it, or
brutal case, yeah.
But they somehow got it past an institutional review board. I have no idea how, and so we're all sort of saying, "Whoa, this would be really interesting, important results to have." But it's on the edge of what I sure wouldn't have proposed a trial like that. Let's just
right.
Anyway, but we're so desperate. We're saying, all right, well, hopefully nothing bad happens.
We'll try it. Yeah,
we'll hold our nose and see it happen.
All right. Well, hey, I know we want to land this plane, just because I know we've got some other stuff going on. But you hit on a couple of topics that ran it, so I feel the need to ask you: did you watch the South Park special?
No, I didn't see it. How was it? Was it good? Was it good?
I'm not gonna lie. I thought the pandemic special, the last one, was a lot better.
It started strong. It started strong.
It started strong and
so
got
basically the hot spot in town was like a CVS, and like there was like a bounce.
It was a Walgreens.
Oh my God, that's
and like all the kids are trying to get in, and then all the senior citizens are running in, going.
There's velvet ropes, and there's like Jesus is in the line waiting to get a vaccine. Everybody's being, and there's a the typical nightclub security D-bag with like the beefy arms and the tight black T-shirt and a clipboard. You're not in the list. And then this little old lady comes walking up, and he was like, "Oh, come right in, ma'am." And then she turns around and she's like, "Yeah, 79 years old." Flips the bird at everybody.
Well, I've been working to it around the clock. So I'm helping out guys on one side of the continent, like India and Singapore and Philippines and so on, and then Europe gets, and so I'm up until like 3 o'clock in the morning. Then Europe gets up and starts.
I'm not blaming you for not having a lot of free time.
So I missed South Park, which is I have to catch on the road. There is one last thing I should say.
Shoot.
And that is, and maybe I should come back and talk about it later. But it's long haul COVID. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that at all, but eventually maybe we save it for another day. But it is really important. You don't want to get COVID, right? I mean, if you get COVID, there's a great chance, and we can talk about this later.
I was like, let's book, because that's something that is near and dear to my heart, because I'm still coping. So yeah.
Yeah, so make sure that you just wait till you get the vaccine before you do anything, because you do not want to have COVID, because it turns out there's more than just you die or you live. You could be living with some really bad bad organ failure type situations for the rest of your life. So you don't want to do that. Just try to avoid, if you can, get the vaccine. You'll be good, in much better shape. So, hey, I have a picture of myself getting the shot. I don't know if you guys saw.
You get the. I heard people were looking for. They're trying to figure out the cute name for what they call them, vaxies, or trying to
Fauci
vaccine selfie.
Fauci, as I've
heard. The Fauci ouchie is the shot. It's so yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah. So, gosh, I appreciate the time, you guys. Let's get together and talk about long COVID. And actually, in a couple of weeks, I gave this talk to Harvard, and they said, well, we like the biology part of it, but the economics part, you have to change that a little bit. We don't. So, in a couple of weeks, I'll talk about the COVID economics if you're interested.
Okay, yeah, we'll bring you back for talking about long, because I'm sure there'll be more data then about long haul and
absolutely. Yeah, let's do it in a few weeks. Look forward to it.
Thanks for the time, man.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You guys.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, you guys. Talk soon.
Good to see you, bud.
You bet. Bye now.
All right.
Woo.
We'll have Fred on for 30 minutes at the beginning of the episode.
It is always the best of times, the worst of times.
Like I said, Fred wants this to go on forever. This pay dirt.
This dude, he doesn't charge for a lot of his consulting stuff. That's
really?
I give him all the credit in the world.
I'm just, I'm being funny.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, you know what?
Go ahead.
No, I was ready to cut it.
Oh, okay. You want to at least talk about the South Park episode?
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. I was pretty meh about
the best part about it was Cartman saying he's mailing it in, which is mocking them mailing it in. So
he's like, oh, these are the we're just phoning it in. It's such simplistic humor. We're not even trying anymore. Like we're just
like they're basically making fun of themselves through the
Oh,
so
yeah.
you can tell as you're like, it started strong and then just like it's kind of like we just ran out of shit to do, so we're just gonna let this thing just fall off a cliff and we don't care.
All right. Well, I mean,
it's kind of like Bill Burr at the Grammys.
Didn't watch it.
Watch the Bill Burr clips.
I hear if you want your own Grammy, you just stick around after the end of the award show and they hand out the extras.
No, they had. If you didn't see it, they had Bill Burr announcing for everything, like basically like 3 or 4 like best Latino vocalist and like that type things like that.
Okay.
And he's like, I can just see all the feminists now going, why is this cis male announcing the Latinx awards? He got shit for that. And then he comes back and he goes, am I the only one that wanted to kill himself during the piano solo? You're like, whoo, whoo, whoo.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, when you hire
that was the running joke about, the Mandalorian and Gina Carano. Like, oh my God, like you're on a show with Bill Burr and you're the one that gets canceled. Like, how does that?
Well, you ordered the Thai food extra hot and you wondered why your butthole burns.
Right.
Come on. You know what you're getting into. Let's not pretend this is some surprise.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, we can wrap here. I'm good.
Yeah, we're going to cut. I'm looking forward to my 4-hour marathon of the Justice League hot garbage.
When does that start?
I think the 18th.
Did they push it back a week? I thought it was originally the 12th.
Yeah, it's pushed back. I couldn't find it.
Well, I mean, the one thing we've talked about consistently though is WandaVision. Did you watch the Assembled?
No, I saw it on the listing, but I was looking for Bucky and Papa Doc's show, but that's not out yet.
That's this Friday. But actually, the Assembled was really good. I loved how they got into how they basically talked to Dick Van Dyke and talked to the guys that did the set creation and the filming and the lighting and all that stuff to totally recreate everything. Like it was a great watch.
Oh, I will check it out.
It's in my queue, but I'm not as excited about that as I am about the actual show.
Yeah. So, hey, we're going to wrap things up for episode 391. We'd like to thank Fred Brown, fredbrown.com. Appreciate giving us a no-nonsense look at the Rona. On behalf of Bob, Dave, and Randy, have a happy St. Paddy's Day. Stay safe. Drink up your drinks. Get your phone numbers. You don't got to go home. You just got to get the hell out of here. The St. Paddy's thing threw me off. See you next week. Drive careful. Beat it.